welcome everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another of these lunchtime sessions. Like I mentioned before, I'm streaming in a couple different places. So if I look down, it's because I'm on Instagram, looking down on Instagram, but I'm also streaming inside of a Facebook group, LinkedIn, also on our YouTube channel. So, welcome. Today, we have a really interesting, I think, fun and cool little tidbit section that I have for you, all about collaboration and things for us to think about how to get in front of our audiences, cross promoting, and just making sure that we're collaborating in new and exciting and different ways. So I have today 5 different ways to collaborate with podcasters and some bonuses per usual. If you follow me, you know I'm all about the bonuses. And again, just to give us some ideas of how we can be in touch with other podcasters, collaborate, and just, find different ways to, connect with our people in a collaborative setting. So there are going to be topics I talk about today that are going to be quite normal and, like everyone talks about podcast guest appearances, but also challenging us to go beyond that. So if throughout the discussion you find a way like, oh, I've tried this, or I want to try this next, like feel free in the comments to pop that in and share what you're working on and how you are creatively collaborating with different types of podcasters. All right. So if you're new here, my name is Danielle Desir Corbett. I'm a podcast marketing coach. I am really passionate about helping podcasters strategically grow so that we can continue doing what we love, which is creating great content, sharing different thoughts with the world, and making money. Podcasting is a multi-billion dollar, billion, like B with the B, is a multi-billion dollar industry. And unfortunately, I think podcasters, like indie podcasters like me and you who are home podcasting, small time podcasters, we just don't see a portion of that billion. So I'm really just passionate about making sure that we're growing strategically, that we're leaning into our strengths, and that we are making money. Okay. If you want to be a full-time podcaster, that's a possibility, but it starts with the work today, doing the foundations and the groundwork, and being strategic and smart about what we create, how we create, and again, who we collaborate with. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with the 5 different strategies that you can implement. So we're going to start with the one that's the most popular, which is podcast guest appearances. As we all know, podcast listeners have an affinity for other podcasts. They say on average that the average podcast listener will listen to 7 different other podcasts. And for me, I listen to probably 70. I am a voracious podcast consumer. I absolutely love podcasting because I can be multitasking. I can, rewind and just kind of detach myself and do other things. I also think it's very intimate. Like you get to know the host personally. It's a very special, intimate place. Like how they laugh and how they say things, and you feel like you know them even before you even had a chance to meet them in person. So I've been podcasting for 4 years, and I meet people all the time at conferences and different events, and they're like, you sound exactly like how you do on your podcast. I listen to you all the time, and that I think comes off. Even if you're editing your podcast, you can still be very natural and build that like connection with people, right? So podcast with appearances is going to be the number one, because I think this is probably the easiest thing to do. So I think in the beginning, when you are thinking about collaborations, you really want to align yourself and pitch yourself to be on shows that have similar or related audiences to you, into your show, so that at the end, your call to action will be something like, follow my show on the podcast players, or join my newsletter, or something like that, where you can continue the conversation. So I think that's really, really important. In the beginning of my podcasting journey, I really dug into this cross promotion strategy, because I was thinking of it as like a book tour, because I had just recently launched a book, an Iceland travel guide, and I wanted to do a book tour, but obviously I didn't have the money to do it. So I was like, I'm going to go on a bunch of podcasts, and I called this like a podcast tour, and I hit like 10 to 12 shows in a 2 to 3 month period. And I feel like if you're looking for a strategy, that is a really great strategy because you're going to be in multitude of places in a short period of time. And what you should see in your graph is a nice steep incline up versus when you are scattered on a bunch of different shows or a few handful of shows a year, it's going to be very hard to quantify your growth because you're not quite sure where this listener came from, right? Like a lot of our podcast analytics is still murky and it's hard for us to attribute, oh, we did this act, which attributed to this download and this growth trajectory, right? So what I decided to do is the two-prong approach. I took a step back from my show, meaning I took a seasonal break, which means I wasn't creating any new content. I wasn't promoting on social media. And I spent the summer, 2 to 3 months in the summer, just devoted to promoting my book on these podcasts, being on different podcasts as a guest. And I'm telling you, that gave me the boost I needed to really not only sell my book, but also to my graph of my own show was a nice incline up. And as a result, I feel like that's the strategy I would recommend to folks, especially if you're short on time and you're trying to figure out which strategy is the best, right? Nowadays, now that I'm not really promoting anything in particular, for example, I do say yes to different podcast guest appearances, but it has to be super relevant and super related to my show. And that I know that after listening to this half hour episode or an hour episode that they're going to want to connect with me. I also feel like in the beginning I kind of said yes to everybody because I was like, an opportunity is an opportunity. And what you realize is that some opportunities pan out amazingly well and some opportunities don't pan out as well. So just there's a couple of caveats and a couple of things to keep in mind for the podcast appearances. I still think it's a solid recommendation, a solid strategy for 2023. I do think that strategy, like being strategic on who you say yes to and who you pitch, will be really important this year. So that's number one, appearing as a podcast guest. I think a lot of us know that already. Let's continue moving on. So the second opportunity for collaboration is for you to be actually taking that guest interview that you do and actually put it on your podcast feed. And this, I put a star in my notes because this is actually what I'm doing this year. This is the strategy that I'm teaching my coaching clients and I'm doing myself, is because I want to, yes, I want to collaborate with this podcaster and we sit down for awesome conversation and interview, but I want my listeners also to be able to hear this conversation. I want my listeners also to be able to get in on that. And also it provides me with content. Now that's just one more week I don't have to create content for because this was already done for me. It also promotes the guest, the show I was on. So it also promotes that show. So there's a lot of different benefits. I'm promoting another show. I'm sharing this piece of content with my audience, and I don't have to now hopefully edit and do a bunch of other stuff and create this content from scratch, right? So this is the number two. The strategy is what I'm implementing this year. I think that this is it's a smart way, right? Everyone is winning. I will say that you should ask for permission if you are going to do this. So you want to make sure before you sit down and have this interview with this podcaster, you say, hey, would you be open to us actually sharing this episode on my feed? And getting permission is very important. So you want to ask for permission ahead of time. You also want to tweak your title. So you don't want to have the exact same title that the other show had on your feed. So tweak your title, do your SEO, your search engine optimization research, and now you have a piece of content on your feed. Okay. So, an example of this is I was a guest on a show and I talked about my entrepreneurship and motherhood journey, pretty much how I quit my job and found out I was pregnant around the same time, and the navigating like pregnancy and entrepreneurship and getting your business off the ground and all these things. And I asked them, actually, they didn't even I didn't even ask them. They told me, they're like, hey, here's the audio file just in case you want to share it with your folks. And I was like, hell yeah, I want to share it with my folks. Like that's what I want to do. So that really sparked me and was like, yo, if I do this more, like I would have such great content to share with my people and it would just be a great for everyone. So that is something that I am definitely star for this year as something to consider. Again, using that same episode that you did with as a guest on, putting it on your feed, content on your podcast feed is brilliant. All right. Number three collaboration idea is your podcast promo swaps. So think of this as a 30 to 60-second ad, but instead of a sponsor, it's going to be another podcast, another podcaster. So these can be host read, meaning that you are the podcast host and you're reading it out to, as an ad read on your show, or you can ask the other podcasts that you're collaborating with to actually send you a file of them talking about their show and doing the ad read for themselves. So I think for me personally, I prefer me reading the ad on my show. But if I were to accept another file, I would want them to do a couple of things like address my financially savvy travelers, say things like, hey, financially savvy travelers, like just make it more personal than just a random, little ad read. Again, it's all about the personalization, all about making sure your audience feels like you're having a conversation with them and not just, spraying it wide. I will say a resource that I really love for podcast promo swaps, because imagine you're trying to figure out what shows to do the swaps with, who to pitch, and how all of these things. Right, it's a lot to think about. So Tink Media, Tink Media, they have a podcast promo swaps database. Okay. So tinkmedia.co is the website. And I'll make sure wherever this is, I'll have a link to it. But they have a podcast promo swaps database that you can actually add your podcast to if you're interested in, doing swaps. But even if you're just looking for other shows who are open to collaborations and things like that, it's a great database, lots of filter options. And believe you me, I get a lot of pitches from people who find me on that database. So there's a lot of opportunity, and it's a free resource. So I would definitely recommend it as strategy number 3 when it comes to collaborating with podcasters. Strategy number 4 is a feed drop. So a feed drop is when you feature an entire episode or the majority of an episode on your actual feed. Okay, so this may mean you taking an episode of your show and feed dropping it in someone else's feed or vice versa. And this is another opportunity for, again, you can kind of take a step back on your content, but again, you want to make sure this episode is very aligned. And you can do this for other podcasters or other sponsors. I actually had a sponsor who approached me, I think 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. And what they wanted me to do is a feed drop. So they had their own show and they wanted to pay me to feature their episode on my feed. And I said, okay, cool. And I went through their archive and I tried to figure out which of their episodes made the most sense for my listeners. So I think it's a great strategy, but just make sure that your alignment is there and that this episode is intriguing, it's valuable to your listeners, and it's not just, random. You wanted to make sure it's very aligned. So a feed drop is something you could do as a collaboration tool, or it could be something that you get paid to do as well. So I really love number 4, and I've done it at least one time before. Now, the last collaboration opportunity I see is working together on an episode. What I mean by this is you and another podcaster will come together and you'll say, hey, let's sit down and record an episode together. So I actually sat down with another podcaster in the health and wellness space, and we came up with a 3-part episode series all about travel and health and how to, let's say, like things to pack for you to stay healthy on the road, and like how to come back from your trip and feel rejuvenated and not, tired and exhausted and all those things. So we actually sat down and came together and worked on an episode together. So I really love that because we create one piece of content together and it gets shared to our both of our feeds. It allows you to be creative with another creator as well. So this is more integrative than just you being a featured guest and they're asking you questions. Like you're actually together creating this piece of content. Another example of this is when me and Aquania Escarnet from the Purpose of Money podcast, we went ahead and created a 12-part audio docu-series together. So we sat down and we won 4 grants for this opportunity, which was awesome. But we sat down and we were like, okay, this is how our 12 episode series is going to look like. Here's the format. Here's your responsibilities, my responsibilities. And then when we had the episodes ready, we shared it out on, we syndicated it out on both of our feeds. So I think this was so great. Now both of our audiences get access to this content. We're together, we share responsibilities, it's fun, engaging. So there's just a lot of ways you can slice and dice it. If you're short on time, you can do something like the promo swap and the ad read. But if you have a lot of time and you have the capacity, the funds, and the energy, maybe doing like these collaborative episodes together make a lot of sense. And then going a step further beyond that, don't forget you have IG lives, you have YouTube videos that you can create together. You can do a lot of variety of things as a creator. It's not only on your podcast feed, right? Your podcast feed is just one of the places that you can do collaborations. It's not the and all. And all. The last bonus collaborative idea I had for you today is a newsletter swap. So typically, I know newsletter swaps feels like newsletter to newsletter, like if you have two newsletters, but switch it up a little bit. You can say, hey, listen, if you do a 30-second ad read, I'll feature you on my newsletter, right? It doesn't have to always be like the same content in, same kind of content. It could be, let's collaborate, but I'll do an IG live and then you'll do a newsletter feature, right? Or a newsletter mention. I actually use this a lot for my own newsletter. Like I have my newsletter called Grants for Creators. And a lot of my strategy this year for growth is finding other newsletters to swap with. But I can also reach out to other relevant podcasters and see other things that we can do as well. So again, today, I just really wanted to just kind of brain dump just a variety of ways that we can collaborate with other folks, get our work out there, build our authority, and overall, like just build our audiences, right? The reason again why I feel like collaboration is so important is because each of us, we're building our own audiences in a silo, right? Like imagine an island and we're all creating our own islands, and an island has water all around it. But through collaborations, here we are, we're taking our kayaks and we're taking our steamboats and we're creating bridges between their platforms and our platforms again. So I've been a guest on like over 100 shows over the last 4 years, and I see each of those opportunities as a bridge from my brand and my platform to their platform. So I am looking towards being a sticky, having all these webs and having all of these channels connected to me. And a lot of it has been through these podcast collaborations. So that's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. I see some comments coming in. So let's see. Serena says, great session. Thank you, Serena. I appreciate that. And also we have a Facebook user who says, did you have to record an intro for the feed drop episode from your sponsor, or do you just publish the episode as is? That is a fantastic question. So what we're talking about is, like I mentioned, I got sponsored and the sponsor had a podcast. And what they wanted to do is take their episode and put it on my feed for my listeners to tune into and hear. And I agreed, but I actually did do an intro because number one, this is the first time I was ever doing something like this before. I also feel like personally for me, with an intro, I can give an explanation as to why I felt like this partnership made sense, why it was valuable, and like the tidbits that I found interesting about this episode. So I did an intro where I kind of teed it up for them and I kind of let them know, like, hey, I'm partnering with so and so. I love this episode. And then at the outro, I came back with my takeaways. So I came back and said, hey, from listening to this episode, like, here are my 3 takeaways. And what are your thoughts? Share your thoughts with me. So I kind of made it a conversation, and we were kind of tuning in together and like talking about it versus just a straight feed drop where it's just that episode. What I would say, if someone gave me a trailer, for example, let's say if another podcaster gave me a trailer or a sponsor gave me a trailer, meaning it was just a minute or like 2 minutes trailer, I probably wouldn't do an elaborate intro and outro. And I would probably label it like trailer, like so-and-so podcast trailer, because it's so little and it's not like they're going to learn something. It's not like super involved. But if it's more involved and you feel like you want to take the time to do the intro and maybe an outro, then go for it. The wonderful thing about our creative projects is that this is our baby, right? This is our creative projects. We can do what we want. If you're like, I'm just going to do a feed drop and I don't need to tee it up, that's fine. If you want to tee it up, that's fine. So this is your project. You can do as you wish. So I thought that was a great question. And yeah, that was a great question. If I do a feed drop again, I probably will do an intro again. Again, it's not something I do a lot. And I kind of want to give my people a little bit of insights into why I thought they should listen to this, right? They listen to me all the time, but why should you listen to this feed? Why should you listen to this episode kind of thing? So I would do that for next time as well. All right. Let's see. All right. Michaela, thank you. This was great. Thank you. This was awesome. Concrete Pastures. I need to start doing lives. Need courage. Listen, I always am like, I want to do lives more consistently every year. And I'm just doing it now. I'm putting it on my calendar and we're doing these lives on Tuesdays. So yes, lives are great. Prepare for your lives though. Prepare for your lives. All right, everyone. I'm about to head out. I'm going to just review all these concepts just really quickly again before we head out. And I will see you here again next Tuesday around lunchtime, like 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But next week, I am thinking that we're going to be talking about analytics. So, like things to actually keep track of and where to find those things to keep track of. So, that's what I'm thinking for next week. Let me know if you think that's interesting. So, as a quick rundown of what we talked about today, one, appearing as a podcast guest, very common, not the only way though. Two, those same guest appearances that you did, ask those hosts if you can take that episode and put it on your feed. So, repurpose those episodes on your podcast feed. Ask for permission, change the title, focus on SEO. Promo swaps with other hosts is also really cool and really great. These are 30 to 60-second ads that you can do. That's another option. You can do an actual feed drop where you feature the entire episode on your feed. And then think about working together via IG lives and YouTube videos, newsletter swaps and mentions, and ask the other podcaster, like, hey, like, what has worked for you? Like, what have you done that you really liked? You could have your own ideas, but be open to hearing other ideas too, because you might learn something and something interesting might pop up as a result, right? All right. That is all that I have for you. Thank you so much for coming. It was such a pleasure to see all of you today. I will see you next Tuesday with another session, all in analytics, maybe some 5 quick tips, but that was great. I'll be staying on IG Live for a little bit to answer any other questions here. But thank you again, and I will see you all next week. Bye.